And now we have Furret. This adorable fuzzball has had its share of notoriety. It's old school PokeTuber, the Killer Nacho's signature Pokemon, aka Dustbuster. And several Furret appeared in the 4th Pokemon movie, guiding Ash to the lake that would heal Celebi. Also, Pokemon Coliseum fans will remember Rogue Kale and his Shadow Furret. And finally, did you know that Furret is actually 5 foot and 11 inches or 180 centimeters tall? At least according to the all-knowing Pokedex? Yeah, that's crazy. That's literally as tall as me. Today we'll be examining how Furret fared in the competitive scene. And so, we ask, how good was Furret actually? And in this video we'll be going over these competitive formats. Regrettably, Furret was most unviable in its initial epoch of existence. Besides speed, its stats range from average to bad, and its move pool was as bland as it gets, which in conjunction with its lack of resistances, left it bereft of any offensive or defensive utility whatsoever. It was completely outclassed by competing normal types in OU, not just Snorlax. It couldn't match Miltank or Porygon 2, both offensively and defensively. UU wasn't much better either, as it was completely outdone by Granbull, Dodrio, and even Wigglytuff. So it dropped to NU. So was there any hope for it in the lowest tier? Well, technically yes, it wasn't a bad Pokemon in its own right. However, even there it struggled to stand out against its fellow normal types, and realistically was almost never going to be the best, most competitively minded choice for its team. Wigglytuff was also in NU, and it was one of the metagame's most consistent Pokemon, so that alone was already a near death sentence. It didn't stop there though. Stantler and Lickitung were not far behind it. Furore was quite good, Dunsparce, Pidgeot, and Persian were useful, and even far-fetched Porygon, Raticate, and Noctowl were better choices than Furret was. And as far as nondescript normal types go, Furret was at the bottom of even that lowly barrel. Of course, if one wanted to use one of the most adorable Pokemon around, 5'11", adorable, then Furret would have been a near instant spot on a team. But as far as competition went, Furret really couldn't hack it even in NU. Even the other Pokemon that were not so good still offered more than it, with its thoroughly insipid move pool and run-of-the-mill stat spread. It was the same story for Furret in Gen 3. Despite the addition of Choice Band giving it a power boost, it stood no chance in OU and no chance in UU. While it technically wasn't that bad as a standalone Pokemon in NU, using it was nothing but detrimental to its user. Plus, it wasn't outclassed by any old Pokemon. It was outclassed by one of the best in the tier, Raticate. Go check out the Raticate video. Now, technically, Furret had some new nice tricks up its sleeves, tricks Raticate didn't have. The first was Focus Punch, which would hit rock types like Relicanth and Pupitar harder than Raticate's Hidden Power Ground. The second was Trick, which would cripple any physical wall reliant on leftovers, and the ability to switch moves such as Torkoal and Mawile. While these qualities seemed good enough to warrant occasional use, they weren't enough, because their use was prediction reliant, and even with the Choice Band attached, Furret wasn't threatening many Pokemon out. Its attack stat was simply too low. Raticate not only had higher attack, but became even stronger if hit with status, thanks to Guts and its Facade, whereas Furret was simply crippled by status. Plus, perhaps most importantly, as the fastest Pokemon in the tier, it had a crucial speed advantage over other fast Pokemon like Haunter and Plusle, which outpaced Furret, meaning it had far more opportunities than Furret to fire off its more powerful attacks in any matchup. Raticate was such a superior overall Pokemon, I never thought I'd say that sentence, that it was pretty much always the better choice over Furret, even despite Furret's minor advantages, and thus, once again, Furret was more or less unusable in NU if your main goal was winning. The 4th generation did give Furret some more new tricks. U-Turn, good for a light hit while maintaining momentum, and Sucker Punch, a powerful priority move good for picking off faster Pokemon. Of course, when considering how each new generation's power creep makes the previous generations pale in comparison, this wasn't nearly enough for Furret to find even the slightest semblance of viability in any tier. Not in OU, not in UU, and not even in NU. Raticate in the tier, again, also packing U-Turn and Sucker Punch, but Raticate wasn't even close to being the most dominant normal type in the tier. That would be the excellent Tauros. There were many others too. Licky and Dodrio were also top tier, and even slightly more niche picks in Perugly, Linoon, Persian, and Lopunny were generally more useful than Raticate, and by extension, Furret. Furret couldn't even hope to carve out a niche for itself with funky use of Trick. Lopunny did that as well, and was not only a better overall Pokemon with its great speed and support capabilities in Encore, but was even better at using Trick. Well, technically it used Switcheroo, but same difference. Anyway, it was better at using it thanks to its ability Klutz, which meant it wasn't affected by its item. This meant it could hold a choice item without being locked into moves, or a Flame Orb without being burned. And we realize we're beating a dead ferret here, but there really was no hope for Furret whatsoever. Furret would have had some use in Gen 5 if given some notable boosts, like maybe Huge Power or Swords Dance on top of that, and just for the hell of it, boosting its base attack from 76 to 176. That probably would have been pretty good. Sadly, it received nothing of the sort, instead receiving the mildly interesting ability Frisk, and nothing else. So once again, it plummeted to NU and didn't find any sort of usage there. There were more amazing normal types than ever, with Tauros now joined by the likes of Kangaskhan, Swellow, Braviary, and a seriously buffed Zangoose. Furret's trick could potentially annoy something like Regirock or Tangela, but it wasn't worth dedicating an entire team slot just to doing that when one could just use one of the vastly superior normal types and have a better Pokemon in just about every matchup. Again, if your primary objective was to have the highest chance of winning, you wouldn't use Furret. As such, nobody did use it, and this resulted in Furret becoming one of the first Pokemon to join the so-called ranked of untiered. Gen 6 offered a cruel joke. With the addition of PU, there was finally a tier below NU, but by now it was several generations too late. While PU would have been nice in Gen 2 or 3, the accumulated power creep of Gen 6 and lack of any buffs besides a stronger knockoff for Furret meant it was horrendously outclassed even all the way down there. There was no reason to use it over Stoutland, which was a top 2 Pokemon in the metagame, and that's without mentioning the tier's other powerful normal types like Dodrio and Buffalan. Once more, Trick was a great move, but not so great that it justified using a Pokemon that otherwise was so thoroughly, entirely inferior to its competition. There really wasn't any more to it than that. Furret's stats and move pool were just abysmal, and thus it was not used in favor of Pokemon whose stats and move pool were not abysmal. As such, Furret found itself in untiered for the second time in 2 generations. Gen 7 brought Z moves, but those were not nearly enough to save Furret from complete and utter lack of viability, even all the way down in PU once again. Matter of fact, Z moves even managed to make it worse. Not only were better Pokemon than Furret going to be better abusers of them, but the holders of Z crystals were immune to Furret's trick, making it even more difficult or downright impossible for it to accomplish anything at all. As if running a completely inferior Pokemon just for trick wasn't bad enough already, now it was a completely inferior Pokemon that couldn't even pull the trick off. If you are looking to understand just how bad Furret was and expand your vocabulary in one fell swoop, Google synonyms for bad, mash them all together, and you'll barely begin to understand just how abysmal Furret was. For this reason, it blew everyone's mind when Furret naturally moved up from PU to OU, completely dominating the metagame. Its normal stat was unresisted by every Tapu as well as Toxapex, and thus it sliced through the metagame with just kidding. It went to untiered for the 3rd time in 3 generations. But did you believe us even just for a second? You know you did. And that's it. So how bad was Furret actually? It has never had even a semblance of viability whatsoever in any tier throughout history, even the first 2 generations, where it wasn't necessarily completely terrible in its own right in NU. It was still outclassed because it is among the blandest and most mediocre normal types out of all the bland and mediocre normal types there are. It was doomed from Jump Street. Bad stats, non-existent move pool, and no buffs given along the way, which is why it is no surprise that Furret landed in the thrice untiered club. We would have loved Mega Furret or a Alolan Furret or even a stat boost or 2, but that was clearly too much to ask. Unfortunately, doesn't begin to cover it with this Pokemon. If or when it returns to Gen 8, it is likely to repeat the cycle unless Game Freak suddenly remembers or cares it exists. Thanks for watching, everyone, and as always, if you liked the video, be sure to subscribe to False White Gaming for more weekly Pokemon content, and in the comments, I want to know, you know what, just give me your most absurd ideas to buff Furret, so we can at least give it some hope. Also, thank you so much to our patrons for continued support of our videos, and thank you to everyone else watching as well. Follow my crew on these social media platforms, and that's all I got. See you next time, everyone.